and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'll discuss 5 communication mistakes that new leaders make. As a new and emerging leader, it can be hard to decide which leadership fundamentals to focus on and which bad leadership styles or habits to avoid entirely. Well, since communication is always at the core of everything that leaders do, today's focus is on 5 key traits of ineffective leaders to avoid so that you can interact effectively and successfully with your team. So if you want to know how to communicate like a leader, stay tuned. I'm Jaboria and welcome to my channel, the best place for new and emerging leaders who want help navigating challenging conversations in the workplace. It's widely understood that from time to time, when you're new and learning how to communicate like a leader, you're going to make a few communication missteps. As you develop your leadership communication style and learn more about the role and importance of communication in leadership, you come to understand that some communication mistakes are common and unavoidable. This is especially so when leaders are doing their best to lead their teams well. The thing is, there's so much to know about effective communication for leadership success that it can be overwhelming at times. Well, the key thing to remember is to just start with the basics and focus on the things that you can do well at the very beginning while avoiding the things that can be mistaken as characteristics of a bad leader. Well, the good news is that you're tuned into this channel where we focus on how to communicate like a leader. So if you're excited to hear more of my top 5 communication mistakes that new leaders make so that you'll know which traits of an ineffective leader to avoid, give this video a thumbs up and let's get into it. Tip number 1 among communication mistakes that new leaders make is they fail to communicate with their teams, or what's worse, there's inconsistent communication. One of the most common traits of ineffective leaders is that they're so busy doing the work that they don't make time as a habit to regularly communicate with their teams. What this often looks like is staff don't know what their leader is doing. They know that their leader is hired to guide and direct them, but they never hear from the leader and they have no sense of direction or unity. One of the key indicators that you've fallen into this category is when you hear your direct reports state things like, "We don't know what our boss does all day. We barely even hear from him or her." Or, "We don't know what's going on in the company or what we're supposed to be doing because we don't get any updates." Communicating with your direct reports keeps them informed, and it also helps to establish you in the role as the leader. It's also important for each leader to establish a consistent pattern of how and when you communicate so that the team can come to rely on your guidance and direction. When you don't communicate consistently, it can make team members feel disconnected from you and disconnected from the unit and also disconnected from the company. This may have a domino effect that presents itself as discontent or low morale among the staff. Direct reports often want their leaders to update them regularly, and they want to be well informed about the work that's relevant to their jobs. Think about it. Don't you hate being the last to know when you depend on your leader to give you information and to communicate with you? It's because at their core, people want to feel connected and a part of something. And as a new leader, if you can tap into that through the medium of consistent communication, then you will build trust and unity within your team. Now, you can choose to use whatever communication mediums or methods that work best for you and your team. The main objective is to establish a routine pattern of sharing information so that your team knows when to expect to hear from you. Keeping your team updated with changes and work-related information is an easy and helpful tool that's readily available to you in order to make a connection and build trust with those that you lead. Tip 2. Tip number 2 of common communication mistakes that new leaders make is failure to use appropriate communication. Now, I'm not referring to expressing yourself in an offensive way. It's safe to say that it would be frowned upon in any workplace. I'm definitely not advocating offensive behavior of any kind. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when a leader doesn't communicate in a way that's relevant or appropriate to the situation. There are many examples of this, but for today's conversation, let's look at two of them. Example 1 and 2 are over-communicating and under-communicating. When we think of good and bad leadership qualities related to effective communication, both examples can be viewed as bad instead of good qualities if they're not used in the right way at the right time. So here's an example. Example number 1, over-communicating. Over-communicating is when the leader shares too much information with the team in a situation where it's unnecessary. When leaders share too much information, they may leave the team feeling confused, disinterested, impatient to get away, or annoyed. This is because some of the information may be irrelevant to their jobs, or an excess of information can also sometimes be overwhelming. So let's look at example number 2. Example 2 deals with under-communicating, which occurs when the leader doesn't share enough information with the team. As an alternative, it isn't much better because when the leader doesn't communicate enough, meaning the information doesn't offer value, the team can be at a loss in terms of not being provided with clear direction, and they may be left with a vague understanding of what the objectives are. It can also cause confusion among team members. As a result, direct reports may experience feelings of uncertainty, apathy, and this may also undermine the credibility of the leader. The solution is to find a balance between the two. This means that you should tailor your communication style to the method that most appropriately fits the situation. You want to focus on what's needed at that time. You can do this by asking 3 questions. Question number 1, what is the objective of the communication? This question will help you to examine what you're trying to accomplish with the communication. And you'll be able to hone in on what's the desired outcome because that'll help you craft the message. Question number 2, what does my team need to know to perform at their best? This question focuses on how the information will affect your team and the work that you need them to accomplish. This will help you to tailor your message to specific items that will allow you to give clear direction and create a communication framework. By focusing on the impact to the work and to the team, your direct reports will be provided specific as to how what's being communicated specifically applies to them. This often leads to team buy-in. Asking this question may also allow you to include a call to action that will motivate your direct reports. Question number 3. As the leader, what do I need from this communication? With this question, I'm asking, does the communication need to be one-sided? Meaning, is there information that just needs to be relayed from the leader to the team? And sometimes that's required. Or does the conversation need to be interactive? Because as the leader, you need a dialogue like when brainstorming. Neither option is good or bad. It just depends on what the particular situation calls for. By asking these questions, you'll be better equipped to determine if your communication should be concise and succinct or if you should be more detailed. Be sure to like this video if any of these questions resonated with you. And also let me know what questions you ask yourself when you're deciding how to craft your message. Let's get into tip number 3. Tip number 3 of the communication mistakes that new leaders make is they fail to communicate change. Now, for the purposes of today's video, I'm not going to make a distinction between failing to communicate in times of change and failure to communicate changes as they occur. Let's just say that either scenario is less than ideal. Failure to communicate in times of change can be harmful to your reputation as a leader, and it can definitely place you on rocky footing with your team. People are often uncertain and most vulnerable during times of change. This is when leaders are needed the most. This doesn't mean that just because you're the leader, you'll always know how to manage the change. The key is to acknowledge the change and communicate that you are aware of what's going on. When you acknowledge the changed thing or situation or environment, whatever it is, this can go a long way in reducing team anxiety and it provides some assurance, however small. It makes people know or makes people believe that there's someone there guiding the ship. Even if as the leader you don't have all the answers, you should communicate that you're aware of what's going on, and option 1, if you have a plan, you disclose that. Or option 2, if you don't have a plan to deal with the change, you can either say so because transparency has its merits, or if you feel less comfortable with that, you can say that you hope to develop a course of action and you plan to work with the team through the change. Now, sometimes even the most experienced leaders get caught off guard by unexpected changes. When this happens, acknowledging that the change was unexpected may be an option for you. You can choose transparency and state that you don't have a plan yet due to the unexpected nature of the change, but you'll develop a plan to address the change after you've had time to assess the situation. This will go a long way in building trust with your team, and it'll make you a more relatable leader. Now, in the interest of keeping this video short, I can't go into all of the ways that leaders can effectively communicate change and manage change. However, there are many good books that focus on change management. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like for me to make a few recommendations of books that you can read about that. Also, please let me know in the comments below if you know of a few good books about change management that you can recommend. So let's get into the next tip. Tip number 4. Tip number 4 of common communication mistakes that new leaders make is assuming that everyone understands what the leader's sharing. When communicating, most of us assume that the people who we're communicating with automatically understand what we're saying, when the truth is that sometimes there's a breakdown between what we intend to communicate and what the listener actually understands. I imagine that this isn't uncommon in workplaces around the world, and it's largely due to the fact that different people understand differently. And we each also communicate differently. So it stands to reason that we shouldn't assume that people understand what we're communicating just because we're the leaders. You can take care of this easily by just checking in. Ask questions after you communicate about what people understand or understood, and in turn respond to their follow-up questions of you so that everyone gains clarity. Simple enough, right? Let's get to the next tip. Tip number 5. Tip number 5 of common communication mistakes that new leaders make is not seeking to work on developing our communication skills. Because there's a correlation between leadership and communication, developing communication is a basic and essential leadership function. Effective communication is among the major tools in an effective leader's toolkit. It would be like trying to cut a stack of paper with a pair of dull scissors, or trying to cut a tree with a dull axe. In both cases, you can cut them, but you're gonna have a hard time. Professional development is necessary for leaders to learn and grow. And one of the reasons that I started this channel is so that there's a space to focus on it, the importance of communication in leadership, where new leaders can learn and grow. As you continue to develop your leadership communication style and techniques, the tips that I mentioned above will become second nature to you. The takeaway is that as you've watched this video is to continue to hone your leadership craft so that you can develop into the leader that you desire to become. It's all about adding value as a leader and making a positive impact on those that you have the honor to lead. Knowledge, preparation, and action are essential parts of the leadership developmental process. Above all, these techniques will take practice, so don't sweat it if you don't master it all at once. Now, if you're watching this video and you want to learn more about what leaders should stop doing, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell, because in that video, I'll talk about 5 key things that effective leaders know about communication. As always, have a great week, be kind to yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.